In the quiet heart of Mississippi, where churches and farmlands promise peace, shadows concealed unspeakable horrors. A widow slain and set ablaze. 4 workers were executed in a store. A body wrapped in plastic. A wife burned and dumped in a river. Justice caged the living, but the voices of the dead will never have a chance to echo again. And this is Inside Mississippi's Darkest Black Killers vertical bar, full list and shocking true crime cases. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Sammy Patrick. Behind the stillness of rural Mississippi, a single phone call and a barking dog marked the beginning of an unthinkable tragedy. Sammy Patrick, 36 years old and already sought by authorities for a series of vehicle thefts, became the central figure in a case that shocked Scott County. On the 30th of December 2023, he allegedly broke into the home of 73-year-old widow Dee Edie, who lived alone on Old Jackson Road in Forest. Just before the attack, Edie was speaking with a relative over the phone, casually mentioning that her dog would not stop barking. Within minutes, that call went silent. According to investigators, Patrick shot and killed Edie, sexually assaulted her, and set her body on fire. The home was left ransacked, its walls marked by smoke and the violence of the assault. Hours later, family members, alarmed by an alert from Edie's home security system, arrived to find her remains. Sheriff Mike Lee called it the most brutal scene Scott County has faced in years. The manhunt for Patrick began immediately. Law enforcement agencies issued urgent warnings through social media, cautioning residents that he was armed and extremely dangerous. On the 1st of January 2024, while evading capture, Patrick allegedly committed an armed robbery at a Subway restaurant in Woodville, escaping in a stolen dark-colored Ford Ranger pickup. National media outlets reported on the escalating search, with CNN noting that the crime had left a rural county gripped by fear. The pursuit finally ended on January 5. Acting on intelligence, U.S. Marshals and state officers tracked Patrick to a Quick Trip in Byram. A state trooper recognized the stolen vehicle, conducted a stop, and Patrick was taken into custody without resistance. Shackled at his first court appearance, he avoided eye contact with the judge, keeping his head lowered, as prosecutors announced charges of capital murder, sexual assault, and arson. The courtroom atmosphere was tense, with family members of the victim silent but visibly shaken. The district attorney later stated firmly, "We will pursue justice in the fullest measure allowed under Mississippi law." The community reaction was raw and emotional. Vigils were held for Dee Edie, remembered by neighbors as gentle and kind, a woman who often checked in on others despite her own advancing age. At the same time, some locals admitted disbelief, with one of Patrick's former neighbors recalling, "He would often ask if we needed help. I never thought he was capable of this." As the case moved through Mississippi's judicial system, the wider lesson became clear: violence can erupt where it is least expected, and tragedies like this leave lasting scars. From this case, 3 urgent warnings emerge. Early behavioral red flags must never be ignored. Strong home security and communication with family can provide vital alerts, and public cooperation with law enforcement during a manhunt can save lives. The story of Dee Edie's final moments stands as a painful reminder: in a world where trust can shatter in silence, vigilance is survival. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Timothy Harrington Jr. In Oxford, Mississippi, a summer morning in 2022 began like any other, but within hours, a disappearance would ignite national attention. Sheldon Timothy Harrington Jr., a 24-year-old graduate from the University of Mississippi, stood at the center of it all. Known locally as quiet and unassuming, Harrington secretly carried on a relationship with Jimmy J. Lee, a 20-year-old graduate student from Jackson. Lee, celebrated for his bold fashion, his drag performances under the name J Diva, and his activism within the LGBTQ+ community, was widely admired. But prosecutors would later argue that this hidden connection turned deadly. On the 8th of July 2022, the two exchanged late-night Snapchat messages. At 5:25 a.m., Harrington's account urged Lee to come back. Just half an hour later, Lee's account replied, "I'm on my way." Investigators later discovered that at 5:56 a.m., Harrington searched Google for "how long does it take to strangle someone Gabby Petito." Minutes later, Lee's phone pinged near Harrington's apartment for the last time. Security cameras captured a black sedan resembling Lee's moving through Oxford and parking at the Molly Bar Trails complex. Around 7:30 a.m., Harrington was seen jogging from the area, flagging down a ride. Hours later, he was spotted buying duct tape at Walmart, then driving a box truck to his hometown of Grenada. Prosecutors say he retrieved a shovel and wheelbarrow from his parents' home, signs of calculated concealment. When Lee failed to show up for community events, alarm spread quickly. Oxford police launched an extensive investigation, aided by digital forensics. Harrington was arrested within 2 weeks and charged with capital murder. Yet, without a body, the defense claimed prosecutors had no proof of death. But that changed in February 2025, when a deer hunter discovered skeletal remains in Carroll County. DNA confirmed it was Jay Lee. At trial in December 2024, jurors heard about Harrington's internet searches, Walmart purchases, and erratic timeline. Prosecutors argued motive, fear of being outed as gay. Harrington's attorney countered that the evidence was circumstantial. After 9 hours of deliberation, the jury deadlocked, split 11-1. Judge Kelly Luther declared a mistrial. When Lee's remains were later identified, Harrington was re-indicted for capital murder and tampering with evidence. His bond was denied, and a retrial is set for October 2025. Standing in court shackled, Harrington kept his eyes fixed downward as prosecutors announced, "We will not seek the death penalty, but we will seek justice." The case rocked Mississippi's LGBTQ+ community. Lee's friends organized drag tributes, fundraisers, and vigils. His former roommate recalled, students, especially gay black men, were scared and terrified. Social media filled with the hashtag Justice for Jay Lee, amplifying grief and outrage. From this tragedy, key warnings emerge. Private digital trails are often decisive in solving crimes, secrets fueled by fear can spiral into violence, and silence in communities allows danger to grow unchecked. Jay Lee's murder shows hidden truths can turn deadly, only truth and vigilance protect communities from violence and secrecy. Number 3. Khadijah Michelle Brown. They believe technology connected families, but in Mississippi, a live stream exposed the darkest end of a marriage to the world. In Columbus, Lowndes County, 28-year-old Khadijah Michelle Brown became infamous not for who she was, but for what she chose to broadcast. On the 25th of March 2023, she aimed her phone at her husband, Jeremy Brown, also 28, during one of their recurring arguments. What began as another dispute between a couple quickly became one of the most shocking Facebook Live tragedies ever captured. The video showed Jeremy trying to leave their Green Tree Apartments home, while Khadijah pressed on, accusing him of mistreatment. The fight was raw, with voices rising and footsteps following. Then, as the phone dropped to the floor, the screen went black. Audio continued, capturing a chilling escalation. Viewers listening live heard a struggle, then a single deafening gunshot. In the background, children screamed, "Daddy!" As Khadijah shouted frantically, the gun went off. The silence that followed was more horrifying than anything seen on screen. At 7:42 a.m., deputies from the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office arrived after a 911 call reported domestic violence. They found Jeremy Brown dead from a gunshot wound. A 9mm handgun lay nearby. Khadijah, still in the apartment, was taken into custody without resistance. Sheriff Eddie Hawkins called the act tragic and senseless. His statement echoed across local broadcasts and national outlets, where the crime became a viral talking point. Investigators determined the shooting was not premeditated, but its cruelty was undeniable. Prosecutors emphasized that the murder had unfolded in front of the couple's children and an online audience. The live stream itself became our strongest piece of evidence, one investigator told the court. The combination of physical trauma and digital exposure turned a private tragedy into a public nightmare. In May 2024, Khadijah, then 29, stood in a Lowndes County courtroom, dressed in prison uniform, wrists shackled. She barely looked up as charges were read. Prosecutors described a woman who had weaponized both a firearm and the reach of social media. Facing the weight of her own broadcast, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The judge imposed a 40-year sentence, with 34 years in prison and 6 years under supervised release. Reporters noted her vacant stare, a stark contrast to the chaos she had once streamed to the world. The community's reaction was immediate. Social media replayed the video's final moments, sparking fierce debate about domestic violence, the risks of oversharing, and the emotional toll on children. Sheriff Hawkins urged caution. Not every private fight should be made public, and this one ended in the worst way possible. The lessons are harsh but clear. Unresolved domestic conflict can escalate into irreversible violence. Social media is not a safe outlet for volatile disputes. It magnifies harm. And without early intervention in abusive patterns, tragedies multiply in silence until it's too late. Khadijah Brown's case shows anger broadcast online destroys families. Only restraint, vigilance, and intervention protect lives from irreversible tragedy. Number 4. Curtis Giovanni Flowers. They trusted justice to be swift, but in Mississippi, one man's fate was twisted through 6 trials and decades. Curtis Giovanni Flowers, born in Winona in 1970, had no prior criminal record when his name was tied to a brutal crime. On the 16th of July 1996, 4 employees at Tardy Furniture were discovered shot to death. Owner Bertha Tardy, 59, workers Carmen Rigby, 45, and Robert Golden, 42, and teenager Derek Bobo Stewart, just 16. All were executed inside the store, a massacre that shocked the town. Investigators immediately turned to Flowers, a former employee fired just 13 days earlier. Prosecutors claimed he stole a .380 pistol from his uncle's car that morning, entered the store, and killed the 4 as revenge for being dismissed and for a small debt owed to Tardy. He wanted to get even, the state argued, and he made sure no one lived to tell the tale. In 1997, Flowers faced his first trial. An all-white jury convicted him and sentenced him to death. But that was only the beginning. Across the next 2 decades, Flowers was tried 6 separate times by the same prosecutor, Doug Evans. 4 convictions were later overturned for misconduct and racial discrimination in jury selection. 2 other trials ended in hung juries. Still, in 2010, Flowers was again sentenced to death after a jury with only 1 black member found him guilty. The evidence was fragile. Jailhouse informants later admitted they fabricated testimony under pressure. Forensic experts criticized the state's ballistics claims as unreliable junk science. Key witnesses recanted, saying they had been coerced. Defense lawyers insisted this case was never about facts, it was about a prosecutor determined to win. The turning point came in 2019 when the U.S. Supreme Court intervened, and Flowers v. Mississippi, justices condemned Evans's relentless effort to rid the jury of black individuals, noting he struck 41 of 42 potential black jurors across 6 trials. The court overturned the conviction, declaring the process unconstitutional. By September 2020, the Mississippi Attorney General dropped all charges, citing the collapse of witness credibility and lack of evidence. After 23 years, most of it on death row at Parchman Prison, Curtis Flowers walked free. In 2021, the state paid him $500,000 in compensation for wrongful imprisonment, the maximum allowed by law. Reactions were divided. Some relatives of the victims insisted Flowers was guilty. Others urged the state to end the cycle of retrials. The case became a national symbol of prosecutorial misconduct and racial bias, amplified by the investigative podcast In the Dark, which uncovered recanted testimony and hidden evidence, reaching millions of listeners and reshaping public opinion. This saga leaves hard lessons. Prosecutors abusing power can destroy lives and faith in justice. Racial bias in jury selection undermines fairness at its core, and investigative journalism remains essential in holding the system accountable when the truth is buried. Curtis Flowers' ordeal proves injustice thrives in silence. Only vigilance, fairness, and truth can protect lives from wrongful convictions. Number 5. Ryan Christopher Hopkins and Yolanda Torrens. They thought betrayal ended with arguments, but in Mississippi, one accusation spiraled into a conspiracy ending in blood, marriage, and lifelong sentences. On the 31st of March 2019, Ryan Christopher Hopkins and his girlfriend, Yolanda Torrens, drove from Jackson to Forest, Mississippi. Their target was Celeste McDonald, a woman from Scott County who had accused Hopkins of rape just 9 days earlier. Prosecutors later called it a love triangle plot, with Hopkins and Torrens determined to silence McDonald permanently. After luring McDonald into their car, they drove her back to Jackson. Along the way, they discussed her fate openly. At a residence on Belvedere Drive, Torrens left to buy bleach, plastic wrap, and detergent from Walmart, XX, tools for concealment. While she was gone, Hopkins slashed McDonald's throat. When she returned, Torrance picked up a second knife and inflicted another wound. Together, they wrapped the body, transported it across the Mississippi River into Louisiana, dumped it in a ditch near Mound, and covered it with bricks. Less than 24 hours later, the pair returned to Jackson and got married, attempting to seal their bond over violence. On April 1, McDonald's body was discovered in a marshy area near Mound. The brutality stunned investigators. Hinds County District Attorney Jody Owens later said, "There are crimes that shake you, and then there are crimes that haunt you. This was both, that is evil." The investigation moved swiftly. Forensic evidence linked the couple to the murder. Walmart surveillance confirmed Torrance purchasing the cleaning supplies. Testimony later revealed that both had plotted the killing in the car ride. In court, prosecutors described Hopkins as a throat-slashing murderer, and Torrance, though younger and less dominant, was no bystander. In 2024, Torrance struck a plea agreement. She admitted her role and testified against Hopkins in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years, with 15 suspended, leaving her eligible for release in 2047. In May 2025, Hopkins faced a Hinds County jury. After hearing graphic testimony and reviewing evidence, they convicted him of first-degree murder and conspiracy. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole plus 20 years. In court, Hopkins showed little emotion, his eyes fixed downward as the sentence was read, while Torrance sat behind prison glass, now divorced from the man she once married hours after a killing. The community's reaction was horror. The calculated cruelty, combined with the bizarre wedding, ensured the case stood out even in a state familiar with violent crime. Local residents described it as unreal and chilling beyond words. The DA's words echoed across Mississippi news outlets, underscoring the rare brutality. From this crime come urgent lessons. Never underestimate threats from those facing exposure. Silence can provoke deadly retaliation. Recognize patterns of coercion and manipulation in relationships before they escalate. And remember that complicity, even from love or fear, leads to devastation no different from the act itself. When trust is twisted into violence, even bonds of love can become weapons and justice becomes the only anchor left. Number 6. Michael Owens. One missing mother, a burned car, and a river hiding secrets. Mississippi soon uncovered betrayal disguised as marriage vows. Michael Owens of Edwards, Mississippi, was a father of 4 and husband to 3 6-year-old Ebony Owens. Their marriage of 6 years was marred by infidelity and distrust. In March 2023, that tension erupted into a crime that prosecutors later described as calculated, selfish, and cruel. According to testimony, an argument inside their home escalated when Michael shot Ebony in the back of the head. Rather than call for help, he wrapped her body in a blanket, loaded it into her car, and drove toward the Big Black River. He later confessed that he considered taking her to the hospital but changed his mind. At the bridge, he threw her body into the water. The attempt to erase her presence did not stop there. On the 16th of March 2023, Ebony's white Acura TLX was found burned along Old Highway 80, her license plate removed and discarded in nearby woods. Investigators uncovered a gas can, drill, bloody clothing, and rifles in the couple's home. Detectives later testified that Owens lied 49 separate times about his wife's whereabouts before confessing. He spun story after story, but the evidence told the truth, one investigator recalled. A multi-agency search led to the discovery of Ebony's body on March 25 inches the Big Black River. Her family, who had reported her missing after she failed to show up for work, stood in grief as news spread. The case quickly drew media coverage across Mississippi, especially as the burned vehicle became a haunting image of the cover-up. Owens was arrested and brought to trial in Hinds County in September 2025. During 2 weeks of testimony, prosecutors argued that his actions showed planning, gathering tools, destroying evidence, and concealing the crime. Owens testified in his own defense, claiming he had snapped after finding his wife in bed with another man. The judge dismissed this story, stating bluntly that selfishness defined every part of the crime. The jury rejected the defense's claim of passion. On September 8, they convicted Owens of first-degree murder and third-degree arson. Judge Faye Peterson imposed a mandatory life sentence plus 3 years. As the verdict was read, Owens looked down, expressionless, his face lit by the cameras of local news crews covering one of Mississippi's most high-profile domestic violence cases. Ebony's mother, Alice Jenkins Johnson, told reporters, "Justice was served, but sorry won't bring my daughter back. I'll never forget this." Her words captured both grief and resolve, echoing through Mississippi media. From this crime come lasting lessons. Patterns of control and secrecy are warning signs that cannot be ignored. Violence often escalates after betrayal or threats of exposure, making intervention urgent. And when excuses overshadow accountability, communities must rely on evidence, not sympathy, to protect victims. Michael Owens' case proves love twisted by violence leaves only destruction, and justice remains the final voice for the silenced. Number 7. Emma Rain. A trail of dead husbands raised suspicions for years, but one cold case finally exposed the woman prosecutors called the Black Widow. Emma Rain, born Emma Smith, lived in Mississippi and Louisiana, marrying 4 times and surviving 3 widowhoods. By the time of her 2013 arrest, she had been married to her 4th husband, but prosecutors were focused on the 2006 murder of her second, Ernest Smith, a 38-year-old pastor and truck driver who was gunned down outside his apartment in New Orleans East. Ernest had grown up orphaned and was known as hardworking, but his sudden death raised questions that took years to answer. On the 12th of April, 2006, Smith was shot twice in the chest at close range with a 9mm pistol. At first, the case went cold, partly because New Orleans police resources were overwhelmed in the chaotic aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. But the killing was no random act. 2 months earlier, Smith's $800,000 life insurance policy had been rewritten to benefit James Rain, Emma's lover at the time. The prosecution later proved this was the heart of the motive, a murder-for-hire scheme to secure money and remove a husband. Investigators revived the case in 2013 when relatives of James Rain came forward with critical information. They reported that a man named Alfred Terry Everett had confessed to being the hitman. Police re-examined records, traced financial motives, and tied Emma to the conspiracy. Everett was arrested and convicted of second-degree murder in 2014. Under oath, he admitted Emma and James Rain promised him $10,000 to carry out the shooting. Emma's own behavior fueled suspicion. At the time of her arrest in Missouri, she allegedly asked detectives which husband she was being arrested for. Courtroom observers described her demeanor at trial as composed but cold. Prosecutors told the jury, "This is a woman who couldn't get enough of killing her husbands for insurance money." In August 2016, after a 2-week trial, a New Orleans jury convicted Emma Rain of second-degree murder. The judge sentencing her to life in prison without parole described the crime as calculated betrayal. As news broke, she was portrayed widely in the media as a modern-day Black Widow, a label her defense team argued was unfairly prejudicial. Her 4th husband, John Golston, publicly insisted she was innocent and claimed she was framed. The defense argued that James Rain and Everett may have plotted the killing without Emma's involvement. Yet the jury unanimously found her guilty, citing the insurance change, her ties to the hitman, and her financial gain. The lessons from this case are stark. Sudden changes in insurance beneficiaries often signal hidden motives. Relationships entangled with money and infidelity can breed lethal outcomes. And when violent patterns emerge, dismissing them as coincidence risks tragedy repeating itself. Emma Rain remains in prison today, serving life without parole. Her case is a chilling reminder that behind calculated love lies betrayal, and only vigilance exposes the truth. Number 8. Dwan DeAndre Wakefield. A quiet night in Jackson turned into tragedy when a stolen car revealed the unimaginable, a 6-year-old boy shot dead. Dwan DeAndre Wakefield was just 17, a former Ridgeland High School quarterback whose future collapsed when he became entangled in one of Mississippi's most heartbreaking cases. On the 18th of May 2017, 6-year-old Kingston Frazier was left asleep in the back of his mother's Toyota Camry while she briefly entered a Kroger store. It was a routine moment, but within minutes, everything changed. Byron McBride, along with Wakefield and D. Allen Washington nearby, spotted the running car. McBride jumped in and drove away, unaware or perhaps uncaring that a child was inside. Kingston's mother called police at 2:30 a.m., sparking an immediate investigation. By 4:31 a.m., the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation issued an Amber Alert. Hours later, the search ended in devastation. The Camry was found abandoned on a dead-end road in Gluckstadt. Inside, Kingston lay lifeless, shot in the back seat. The image of his small body gripped the state and sent shockwaves through national media. Investigators moved quickly. Wakefield was taken into custody before noon that same day, followed by Washington and McBride. Initially, all three faced capital murder charges. Prosecutors argued Wakefield's role was not as the shooter but as someone who assisted after the crime. According to testimony, Wakefield drove McBride home and withheld information during the critical hours of the Amber Alert. During trial, prosecutors portrayed his actions as crucial in shielding a killer. Wakefield's defense countered, insisting he never wanted harm to the child and begged McBride to let Kingston go. His attorney argued, driving someone home is not murder. Yet jurors were unconvinced. In October 2019, he was convicted on 3 counts of accessory after the fact to murder, kidnapping, and auto theft. The court sentenced him to 35 years in prison. Wakefield, only 19 at sentencing, appeared stunned as the verdict was read. Family members of Kingston Frazier wept openly in the courtroom. His cousin Christy Archie told reporters, "We just want justice for Kingston and his mom and dad because they are still hurting." Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant issued a statement condemning the killing as senseless violence that shook the conscience of the entire Growler state. Wakefield's appeals stretched to 2024, reaching the Mississippi Supreme Court. Each time, his conviction was upheld. Justices affirmed that aiding someone who committed multiple felonies can result in multiple accessory convictions, ATD, a precedent-setting decision in state law. From this case emerge lessons society cannot ignore. Never leave children unattended in vehicles, even for moments. Understand that peer influence in youth can spiral into life-altering consequences. And finally, recognize that silence or passive assistance after a crime carries the weight of justice. Kingston's life was cut short, but his memory endures as a painful reminder that opportunities for intervention often come only once. When choices collide with conscience, hesitation can turn deadly. Justice demands accountability, even for those standing just one step away. Number 9. Tyrell Collins and Desarius Johnson. 2 accused killers vanished into the night through a ceiling panel, and Mississippi woke to a manhunt gripping national headlines. Tyrell Collins, just 24, and 18-year-old Desarius Johnson were locked inside the Claiborne County Detention Center on separate murder charges. Collins faced accusations of killing his cousin James Collins in Copiah County, while Johnson had been indicted for a 2022 shooting in Jefferson County that left 1 dead and 2 others wounded. On the 5th of July 2024, at around 2:20 a.m., they climbed through the ceiling of their cell, dropped to the ground using knotted bedsheets, and disappeared. The timing was no accident. Investigators later revealed that the jail security cameras had been out of service for weeks. Their escape was discovered only after head counts failed to match. These 2 are considered dangerous, warned Sheriff Edward Goods during an emergency press briefing. Social media quickly amplified the warning, with the sheriff's office live streaming updates and urging citizens to stay indoors. For 33 hours, fear ran through Claiborne County. Law enforcement officers combed wooded areas, checked abandoned houses, and coordinated with state and federal agencies. Residents reported sleepless nights, while schools and businesses tightened security. On July 6, around noon, officers finally cornered both fugitives inside an abandoned home. A Facebook Live video showed them being marched out in handcuffs, ending the brief but alarming chapter. Authorities wasted no time assigning blame. This was not the first escape from Claiborne County Detention Center. Previous breakouts had exposed the same ceiling vulnerability. Adding to public outrage, officials admitted the DVR system meant to record surveillance footage had not been working for weeks. Sheriff Goods described it as a serious failure, while county supervisors faced questions about chronic neglect of jail repairs. Neither Collins nor Johnson had yet faced trial for their original charges when they staged the escape. Records indicate his trial took place in late 2024, though verdict details remain under seal in court records. Collins, meanwhile, is still awaiting trial for allegedly killing his cousin. Both men now face additional escape charges, carrying up to 5 years in prison, ensuring that their brief taste of freedom only lengthened the time they will remain behind bars. The community reaction was marked by frustration and fear. Many residents criticized the county for failing to secure the jail, calling the situation a disaster waiting to happen. National outlets picked up the story, highlighting systemic issues in small-town detention centers across the United States. From this case emerge lessons communities must take seriously. First, weak infrastructure in correctional facilities endangers not only inmates but entire communities. Second, public alerts and social media transparency can be vital tools in protecting citizens during crises. Third, oversight matters. Ignoring security flaws only invites greater risks. The escape of Collins and Johnson may have lasted just 33 hours, but it revealed deep cracks in Mississippi's justice system. When security fails, danger spreads quickly. Accountability in institutions is the thin line between public safety and chaos. Every case we've uncovered tonight proves one chilling truth: in Mississippi's darkest corners, betrayal, silence, and fear can spark unimaginable violence. But these stories are more than crime, they're warnings, reminders of how fragile trust and safety can be. If this journey into true crime shook you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Justice Reversed, hit the notification bell, and you'll be the first to uncover the next shocking case we bring to light. Because in a world where danger hides in plain sight, missing the truth can cost more than you realize.